Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending to the session today. Today I will talk about how we can extract events from Connect and send it to a local CMMS system. So I assume that some of you have heard about Connect Flows, formerly Crosser, some of you have not. So I will start with a brief introduction, and then we will just dive into the actual presentation. Just shortly regarding the agenda, just so you know that what we are talking through. First, quick introduction to Connect Flows, just to bring everyone on the same page. I do know some of you know already, but that's important to understand. Following up with the use case description, what we really wanted to do here. Talking about the architecture, because the architecture is pretty important to understand in order to get the benefits. And then we can move ahead with the flow design, Q&A, and then we have maybe some time as well. So to begin with, to give you a little bit of an idea of what Connect Flows is, formerly known as Crosser, it is essentially a tool that allows you to build integration between systems on different levels. When we specifically look at industrial environment, you usually have different levels and different systems at different levels. And in most cases, these systems do not talk to each other or with very limited capabilities. So our tool can be used to really build integrations between those systems, starting really down from the shop floor, connecting to sensors, PLCs, up to the level 3 systems, MES systems, PI systems, historians, and also building integrations towards cloud-based applications, SAP, ERP systems, other cloud vendors, as well as Connect, obviously. The idea is not really to build pipelines that send data from A to B, but to do it in a smart way. In a smart way, meaning cleansing data on the fly, building some aggregates, stuff like that, up to the point where you can embed trained AI models into such an integration workflow. Key of the solution is that you will be able to orchestrate all what you want to do in distributed environments from one centralized control plane, which is the Flow Manager. So the concept that we are following is fairly simple to understand. It's a low-code approach, which means that you have predefined what we call modules. Modules could be connector modules to external systems. Things like industrial protocols, databases, enterprise systems, whatever you can think of. We can read from files, we can write to files. Virtually anything can be connected. In addition to that, you have modules to do something with the data. Do something meaning restructuring the data, transforming the data, cleansing it, aggregating it, bringing in more logic, whatever you think about. You take these modules, plunge them together in what we call a flow, and configure them. Once you have that done, you want to make sure that everything works as expected. So the next step in the concept is testing. You can either test these flows in a test environment or in an environment that you have built up in a lab. That's up to you. Important thing is here that you have access to the systems that you need in your flow. Once you're happy with the results, the approach is then to deploy everything down into these runtimes that you might have on different levels in your environment, on different plants, on different sites, different assets across the globe. The two main components that we need to highlight and explain here is the first one is the Flow Manager. The Flow Manager is the management and orchestration layer. That one lives in Connect. So this is where you have your users logging in day by day, building flows, building integrations, testing them, version control, all these things that you need in order to build this type of integration. Important to understand is that the Flow Manager is not the part where the data is being executed. The data is being executed in the second component, which is the Flow Runtime. The Flow Runtime can either be deployed as a Windows service or as a Docker container, and it can literally sit anywhere. It could be deployed on a small Raspberry Pi, on a gateway, in a Kubernetes cluster. We don't really care. This is really just the agnostic runtime that allows you to run and execute these flows. Important thing to understand here, the communication between these two components is always initiated from the Flow Runtime outbound via HTTPS to the Flow Manager. So that's all we need from a setup perspective in order to get this up and running. Once you have your flow configured, you deploy it into this runtime, and then the flow runs autonomously, independent from connectivity to the cloud. So even if you lose connectivity, the data will still be processed as you have designed it to be. Now let's talk a little bit about the use case. So what we came up here is an example where we use Connect flows to extract events from Connect and bring them to an on-site CMMS system. We use existing data in Connect. We use events that have been generated by a wind turbine. So we are listening to new events from Connect starting at a certain point of time. We get the information out, we do some business data transformation and send the information to the on-site CMMS system. So I mentioned at the beginning that we will talk about a little bit the architecture, and I think this is important to really understand the concept and how this all fits together. So first of all, we have the first component that we talked about, the flow manager that lives in Connect. You have a login, a single sign-on, you do the integrations, that's this part of the solution. What we have in Connect as well is the event store, and that is our data source in that sense. So these two components are in the cloud environment. But now in order to get some information back from the cloud environment to an on-premise setup, you usually want to run a polling mechanism. You don't want to open any inbound firewall into your networks, you just want to pull it. And therefore, the runtime needs to sit on-prem. And that is what we have here as well. So the runtime, the flow runtime sits on-prem, connecting to the CMMS system and pulling out information from the event store. So that's kind of the setup. What you see here as well is this dotted line between the flow runtime and the flow manager. This should indicate that this is just the management and orchestration path. It's not the path of the actual payload data. The payload data is the kind of regular black line here. So let's see how this really looks in practice. We have a recording here, and I hope this starts right away. Otherwise, let me just press the play button, and I hope that the video is now shown. Perfect. So this is the UI that lives in the flow manager. So what we have here is the kind of landing page with the flows. Flows are kind of the different implementations that you have built. This is just a demo environment for the Milan event, different categories, but we kept it simple here. What we see here now is the so-called Flow Studio. That is kind of the heart of this low-code approach. You have the module library on the left-hand side that you've seen with a bunch of modules available for AVEVA and for other systems. You drag and drop them into this flow, and then you configure these modules in a low-code fashion. What you see here is actually a new way of configuring these modules that we have introduced just lately. And this is what we call interactive configuration. It is a wizard. So the first thing that you need to do, you connect this runtime, this flow runtime, to a flow. And this allows you then to connect interactively with external systems. So the first thing is you specify things like a credential to access this external system, and then you are being guided step by step through the different configuration steps. The connection to Connect in this case is being done with OAuth credentials. I have them pre-configured here. So I just select them from a centralized credential library, and then in the next steps, I get the browsing functionality to select the event stores. Once that is done, I have the module configuration as seen here. And all I need to do then in the last step is to set a starting timestamp. Could be ingest from incoming as well, but I just set it as a fixed value here. So that is the start point for where we want to get the events into our on-prem CMMS system. So this is just the starting point. There's some more detailed configurations that can be set in these modules, but that's not super important for this type of demo. Just to make sure that you understand everything here, that is the documentation for every module. We have documentation and release notes in place directly in the application. So whenever there's a new version of these modules, you can directly see what the changes are in order to, in worst case, adjust your flow. Next thing is we need to think about when we want to trigger this flow. What I do here is I just use a simple interval module and configure it to pull data out, new events data out in a certain interval. And what I usually get back from Connect might not be just one single event, but a list of events. And what I want to make sure is that my flow works not only with this one single event, but with a list of events. So we just have to iterate over this, and that is what we do here in the next step. So now I have 3 modules configured, and I want to make sure that it works until this point as I designed it to be. So I connect into a node, which is called Yorkshire in this case. The flow starts behind the scenes with a WebSocket communication temporarily, and now you can see the messages going through. Important to understand that this is just the debugging part of it. Nothing is being deployed yet on-premise persistently. It's really just to configure and see if everything works as expected. We will talk about the deployment later on. So you see the actual payload going through this flow. So we get a list of events from Connect, we iterate over them, and then we can do some data restructuring, massaging, and so on and so forth. And that is what we do in the next step. Usually, you have the situation that you have some sort of data structure from the source system, but that doesn't match the data structure that is expected from the destination system. So you need to do some data mapping in between. And that is what we do with the message template in this case. Quite simple approach. The message template can be used to introduce a JSON structure with key value pairs. So what we say here is, okay, this is my known target data structure, and I want to map data from an incoming message into that target data structure. So it's a simple mapping in a key value fashion. And when we use these curly brackets, as you see right here, we actually reference data from the incoming message. So it's as simple as that. You have the message template, you click on the property from the debug, and you can pass it in here. And that is how you can step-by-step define the mapping between the source and the destination system in a JSON-based structure. We are creating this now here in this tool, but this mapping structure can be done in any other tool as well, and then just import it in here. So I'm bringing this up here with two examples, which you see here. We set the target property to body, and the body is what I want to post to my local CMMS system. So I essentially enrich the flow now with a new property, which is called payload. I test it again just to verify that everything works until this step. And then once that is done, we see the output right here. So this is now the new property that we had created with the mapping from the incoming message. This is not all the data that we need. There is some more data that we need to map into this data structure. So I've predefined this in an external file just to speed up this process. And now I'm mapping kind of a predefined JSON structure into this mapping module. So there is an editor functionality, and I just copy and paste an existing mapping structure into this, save it, and then this is being used further down the road. So then I clean the output on the right-hand side. Again, important to understand that this is just really temporarily. Nothing is being persisted in that flow manager environment. I configure my HTTP request module. This is just a testing instance. I don't need credentials here. It's just a local one. And then again, with these curly brackets, I reference the payload from the incoming message, which was the body that I'm supposed to use. So now, that is now the last iteration that we have. So we have the trigger, we have the connectivity to connect, we have the mapping, we have the destination system, and that is kind of the result that we have here. So we see the output that we sent, the body that we have posted, we get the result, the status code back, which indicates that the post to the on-prem system was successful. And that's kind of what we do here. So this is now just really the testing and debugging. Next thing would be to deploy it. I have not implemented this in this recording because it's just 3 clicks. So this is kind of where we stop with this presentation here. So just in a nutshell, getting data from Connect, doing some restructuring, and push it into the local CMMS system. This is really just an example. On the output, there could be a database, it could be a broker system, it could be a cloud system, whatever. Really just an example to illustrate you some of the capabilities that we have when it comes to connect and connect events. And that's all I had prepared for this session.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. We have another session in 8 minutes about citizen industrial data developers. You are very welcome. Thank you, David.